Hi, I'm Ethan, and this is going to be the 9th video in my 10-part Unity tutorial series. So in the last video, I covered how to make a checkpoint system and even a next level system. So just to recap, how that system works is whenever our little boulder passes through a blue checkpoint, that is going to be its new spawn point whenever it dies. So let's just try to die here, and then if we fall, and then we respawn like that, our checkpoint, and then if we make it to the next level, so that's another checkpoint, and then we make it to the next level, and then look at that. So now we've spawned at a new level. You can look in the hierarchy, it says level 2. And now let's keep going. We're going to skip that. Look at that. That's called level design. We hit that, and then we're going to spawn at another new level. So in the last video, I made a level 2, and in between the last video and now, I've created a level 3. So I'm gonna exit the game view, and I'm gonna go to my level 3 scene that I quickly put together. So I want to introduce new game mechanics as the game progresses. So in this video, I'm going to try to create a grappling hook. Now that might sound a bit intimidating at first, but if you know the components and get familiar with the tools that you have at hand in Unity, a grappling hook is actually not as difficult as you may expect. So just to get started with, we're going to need to add some new components to our boulder. So let's do that. So in level 3, I'm going to click on our boulder, which is, as always, basically what our player is going to be. This is what they're controlling. I'm not going to touch anything here. Instead, I'm going to add a new component. It's going to be called line render. So this is going to be sort of the visual aspect of our grappling hook. And then you'll see a bunch of scary looking stuff open up. You don't really need to do anything here, but let's see here. We can just change that to 0 if the Z is on 0, because again, this is a 2D game, so we're not doing anything in the Z axis. And then over here, since we have a shader here, let's just make sure that it's default. Let's see, it's default line, something like that, so that it doesn't look ugly. So make sure the material is default line. And then at this point, I'm not going to be doing anything else with this component in the inspector. So I'm just going to click the name of the component to collapse it. And then I'm going to add a second component, which is going to be something called a distance joint 2D. So Unity has joints, and these joints are basically connections between two rigid bodies. So a distance joint just keeps two rigid bodies at the same distance. Now this means that they'll be allowed to sort of swing like this, which is exactly the behavior that we want. So a distance joint 2D allows our boulder to connect with whatever we want it to grapple onto, and then it's going to maintain the distance between it and whatever it's grappling onto, but it's going to be allowed to rotate along that, sort of in an arc like that. So that's really what we're looking for here. So let's see here. I think this is fun. And then we're not going to be adding anything here because we're going to be doing that in our script. So the next thing I want to do is I want us to add a new object that's going to act as our thing to latch onto. So we don't have to be fancy with it. Let's just make a square for now. So this, let's give it a little bit of color, change this, sprite lit default, something like that. Yeah, sprite's default. Change that to a dark gray. Make sure that looks nice. Yeah, that looks fine. So let's just do that. Now, this has nothing on it yet, so let's just give it the basics. Box collider 2D. Make sure this is a trigger. We don't want our player to be trying to grapple onto it, but instead just smash into it and get all their momentum stopped. That's not very fun. So let's keep it like this. In fact, let's increase the size of it. So because this is a box, this is a collider, it means that we're going to be able to click on this game object, and it's going to be able to detect that clicked in the script. And let's also give it a rigid body 2D, but make sure it is set to static. We don't need it to be doing anything. Or we could just set it to kinematic. Either one of those will do. I think I'm going to keep it on kinematic so that it's not as limited. Alright, so this is looking fine so far. Let's call this a node. And let's give this a script just called node. So there we go. I'm now going to make this a prefab and by dragging it into the project as always. So now I can add more of these nodes. Great. So before I start scripting in here, I've now set up all of the basic foundations that we're going to need to set up this grappling hook. So I'm going to go into our boulder script. So, I haven't changed anything. So let's see here. We are grabbing our rigid body. Now that's great. We also want to grab our two new components. Just a reference to our two new components. So let's see here. Private line render line rend and private distance joint 2D disjoint. And then assign them in the start method. Line rend equals to get component line render. And then disjoint equals to get component distance joint 2D. There we go. We now have references to the components that are on our board. Let's see here. Now let's make sure that both of these components are not enabled when we first start the game, because we don't want us to be, grappled onto some random point in space on accident, and we don't want a random line to just be on the map for no reason. So let's see. So in order to enable or disable a component in the script, then just type the component name, or type the reference to the component, and then dot enable equals false. So same for disjoint, dot enable equals to false. Now we're gonna want to be constantly checking. We want to constantly check if we have selected a node. So let's do that. Let's make a new method. I'm going to scroll all the way down. Pirate void select node. Now I want to pass something in, and the thing that we're going to be passing in is the node that we're going to grapple onto. So let's see here. Let's call it node. So this is saying the class that we're the type of thing that we're trying to pass through, and this is just sort of the name of the thing. So I'm not explaining it very well, but I'm gonna quickly show you what that is. So let's see. Let's also get one more reference: private node selected node, and then make sure selected node is null for now, because again, at the start of the game, we are not going to be selecting any objects at first. So let's say select node, selected node equals to node. So when we pass in a node to this method, then our selected node is going to be whatever was just passed in. And then while we're at it, let's make a deselect node, which is just going to set selected node to null, or void deselect node to null. Now we're not calling these anywhere yet, but soon we're going to be doing that. Let's see here. So if is null, if our selected node is null, so if we are not selecting any node at this very moment, then we want to make it so our line render is off. And then we also want our distance joint to be off. Okay, so far so good. And we also want to return. So this basically means that if we're not selecting anything, then don't do anything. In fact, let's see here. I'm just gonna put this in a method on its own, so we're not cluttering up our main update method. So let's see here. Private void, node behavior, and then let's just throw this into here, and I'm going to just call it node behavior. So that's how you call a method, and then we just have that. So far so good. Now, the only case in which we are going to be running this code under here is if selected node is not null, which means we have selected something, which means we should start rendering a line. So let's see, line ren.enable equals to true. And then this joint.enable equals to true. Now, on our distance joint component, over here, you can see a property called connected rigid body, and this is just going to be the object that it's connected to. So we want to make it so that when we click on a node, we want this connected rigid body to be that particular node. So let's go back into our script, and let's just set this joint dot connected body equals to selected node dot get component rigid body 2D. Now we're getting the component because we have to give it a rigid body. So we're going to be selecting the rigid body that's on the node that we selected. Alright, just drinking some water. Alright. Let's see here. Now let's also check, just check if selected node is not null. So if we have selected a node, then we want, so let me clarify. So a line render obviously requires at least 2 points. So we click on our border, line render. Now, in order for a line to exist, it needs at least 2 points. And those 2 points are going to be sort of how the line is going to be. So if we have a point here and then a point here, then our line render is going to render a line between those 2 points. So that's how that works. It should be pretty straightforward if you've ever taken anything related to geometry. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to pass in 2 points for our line render. I go back into my script. So if we have selected a node, then we're going to set the first position of our line render to be our current position. Nope, that's not what I meant to do at all. There you go. So 0 is just going to be the first point in the line. So lists of stuff start from 0 in code. And then we're going to want to set the second position, which is 1, to be the transform dot position of our node, of the node that we selected. Great. So now we have our node behavior, we have this. Now let's go into our node behaviors so that we can actually pass in something to our selected node. Okay. Alright, awesome. Okay, going to our node behavior. Now we want to have a reference to our player. And to do that, I'm just going to do private folder player. So at the start, we want player to be find game. No, let's see here. Player to be game object dot find game object with tag folder, because our player has a tag of folder. Oh, sorry. This should be game object. So now we have our player, and now let's see here. Private folder. Border script. border script, nope, border script equals the player dot get component border. So now we have a reference to our border script. So we're going to be doing something with that because we want to be able to pass in this node to the player. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, private void. How am I going to do this? I'm just thinking. Well, we want to check if the player has clicked on our node at all. So let's just start with that. Public void on mouse down. Let's see here. We also want to store a reference to ourselves, which should be pretty interesting. Let's see, private node. So if we are clicking on this node in particular, then node equals to this. So we're going to set node to this object, this particular object. And just to make sure, we're going to set it to null at first because the player would never be clicking on the node at the start of the game. Let's see here, node equals to this, and then we want border script. Nope, that's not it. Border script dot. Oh, let's see here. Going to here, those should be public, or this should be public. And let's make this public as well, because we want to be able to call these methods from other classes, which in this case is our node. Border script dot select node. So anytime our player is clicking on this node, it is going to pass in this node, and the player is going to know exactly which node it is trying to grapple onto. Now we also want the player to be able to deselect the node to stop grappling onto it. So let's see, on mouse up, which is just detecting when our player is, is releasing the mouse from the box slider. Then we want node to be null, and we also want to deselect the node. Alright, so this is much more complicated than really anything we've done before. That's why it's been a bit slow. It's also a bit of a learning process for me as well. And you know what? Let's just playtest this. So I already have a node here. I'm going to place this a bit closer. I'm going to get rid of these bombs because those are a little impractical for playtesting purposes. Let's move around. And let's just click it. Click. Look at that. It works. It works. Now our line render is a bit screwy. Let's fix that. Go to our boulder. Go to our boulder, and I think it's size. So let's set that to 0.2 instead, or not. Okay. Well, no, it's not size. Size is the number of points on the line. Let's change that to something else. Let's give it a different color. Let's give it a color. Let's make it a nice blue. And then let's see here. Where is the thing that changes how thick it is? Oh, it's right here. It's width. There we go. Let's change that to 0.25. So a quarter. And let's try this again. I hope this looks a bit nicer. Look at that. So we've now made a grappling hook. And if we let go, so holding mouse button, we're going to grapple onto it. And if I let go, we're going to swing. by using our momentum. We're going to swing by using our momentum to sort of be like Spider-Man. We're going to swing, 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 and we're going to make it to this next checkpoint, and then we're going to swing, 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 swing all the way to victory. Make sure you always save. Let's make sure this works with several in a row. So I'm going to do something like this. I didn't make it all the way to the end, but this is just for playtesting as usual. Jump. Oh, I swung myself backwards. Let's do that. A little bit of that. And let's try that. This is fun. Yeah. So this is the really great thing about introducing new game mechanics. You can honestly be really surprised by how fun some of your own sort of features can be. Like maybe it's a little bit of a hassle to develop them at first, but then once you've got it down, it can be a huge blast to really be able to appreciate the progress that you've made in your journey on making these sorts of games. So let's hear. I've made that going all the way down. Let's sort of make some more. We're gonna allow the player to jump and then grapple onto these, and then, in fact, I'm gonna make it a bit of a challenge. The player is gonna need to have enough momentum to swing around with enough momentum to really crash through those boxes. So let's try this out. I'm really excited because this is the sort of thing that makes me really like doing this kind of stuff. And we're gone. We're gone. Look at that. We are falling and we're not stopping. Why are we not stopping? Is our kill box not big enough? So remember, we have errors. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Oh, I see the problem. So when we went through the kill box, it was trying to make us respawn at a checkpoint, but we had never touched a checkpoint in this level. So that may be an error that we can fix very quickly by just doing something like this. So this might be a bit of a messy resolution, but if it works, it works. All I did was, hold on, let me clarify. All I did was I made a new checkpoint. I just dragged another checkpoint in to the start of our level. I dragged it out to be really big. I made it invisible, and that's it. So now if I do this, and then I run off the side of this cliff, then we will have a checkpoint to respawn at. And look at that. That's nice. So now let's play test. Whoop. And then whoop. And then whoop. Look at that. This is fun. And now we've made it to the next platform. Let's blow up these boxes. Jump through them. And I missed that one. Oh, I missed that one too. Now, these are a bit small, but you can actually make the clickable area of these nodes much bigger than the visible area. So you can do this by increasing the size of the box collider. So the way that the game is detecting our clicks is by detecting if our mouse is over the box collider in the moment that we're clicking. So that means we can make it much easier to grapple onto these and catch them in midair by just increasing the size of the box collider, like this. So I would change it from 1.5 to 3, which means it's now going to be very easy to click onto it and latch onto it. So let's override here, apply all. So now all of the nodes will have this huge box collider, which is going to make it much easier and potentially much more fun to grapple. So click there. See, my mouse was barely over it, and I was still able to catch it. And let's do that. Oh, we don't have enough momentum. Oh, yes we do. Come on. We made it to the next checkpoint. Keep going. Alright, click. And click. Oh. Click. And I think, yeah, this is a much more difficult level. But overall, I think this is much more enjoyable now that we've made more game features that keep the game interesting. So this is very important. You should always feel free to add more unique mechanics to the game to keep things fresh and interesting. If you feel bored of playing your own game, then that's definitely an issue, and you should really try to resolve that in any way you can, whether by adding more mechanics, adding more depth to the existing features, or just somehow finding a way to bring more life into your project. And that's really what game development is all about. So this has been the ninth part of my 10-part Unity tutorial series, and I hope you've really learned something from this video. Thanks.